I am so excited to be joined here with the lovely Chantel to talk about the Trauma of Money book. Welcome, Chantel. Genuinely very excited about
Thank
your
you.
book, and I've been in the financial therapy space for a while. I've heard about trauma of money for several years now, but for those listening, do you mind telling us a little bit about trauma of money? What is it? How
Yeah,
did
of
you come up with the
course.
book? Where's the origin story?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here with you, Nate. So, the trauma of money was originally created as a professional development course. And we originally actually created it for financial professionals to have more understanding of some deeper layers that impact their clients' relationship with money. And we created this training program. Um, I'd say 6.5 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And we were very surprised that the people who were coming in who wanted to train with us were actually therapists and trauma therapists and mental health practitioners. Because at that time, 7 years ago, there was not a lot available that went specifically into like trauma and money. Um, and so we've really expanded over the last almost 7 years. And our work is really focused on bringing this trauma sensitive approach into our interactions with money. But when we say trauma sensitive, we're also including exploration of the economic systems that we live in. And so we believe that it's really important to identify like the impacts of collective trauma and some of those systems on the relationship with money, as well as looking what's happening within that individual's experience. So we have developed a method. It's the trauma of money method. And it's 6 steps that practitioners and individuals can use in working with their relationship with money. And this method and the certification training program has become so successful that we were given a book deal. So we can create a more accessible pathway to access this work that we do. So, one of the things about trauma of money is that we really believe everything that we do is meant to help people decrease shame and increase discernment. And one of the ways that we can help folks do that is by exposing them to multiple voices and multiple ways of being with money. So we have 25 different faculty members. And one of the things that I tried to really do in the book was to like include as many voices as possible. You are also one of the voices in the book, and I'm so grateful to have your wisdom in there. So that's a little bit about trauma of money. We are a certification training program. We certify all different types of professionals, and now we've taken our program and essentially taken like elements of it and put it into the book format.
Would you say that the book is more geared towards professionals or more geared to general public?
That's a great question, and there's construction happening right outside my window, so I'm going to just shut the window right now. One second.
That's okay. Well, keep us on edge.
Yeah. Well, I originally, in my book deal, I was originally asked to write it for professionals because I published with Wiley, which is an academic publisher, and they do a lot of like professional books geared towards training professionals. So as I was writing it, um, it was really hard to keep it in that space because the way we teach our course is we have a very like embodied learning experience. So we ask
Mhm.
every professional who does our training to apply the methodology to themselves first. So, we kind of wrote the book in that way, where it's like, this is really helpful for professionals, but an individual can read this and they're going to, through psychoeducation, through all these other experiences and stories, they're most likely going to experience some sort of like new levels of awareness, new insights that could support their relationship with money.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And having joined some of your classes and seeing like your you go very deep with the the work. At least as a professional, I think a lot of us go into educational programs and like, okay, I'm going to learn some things. I'm going to be a better financial therapist at the end of this. But the questions that you ask and that your faculty ask, it's like, oh, this is very, very deep work, and it's clear that the starting with yourself first is a priority in how you do the work. The book is fabulous, and honestly, it's one of the most comprehensive looks at trauma and financial wellness. And I feel like you do this really great job of going from the micro day-to-day living stuff, as well as the macro, social inequalities. And I guess I'm curious. So one term that I just loved was capitalism. I
Mhm.
just think that's such a good way of bringing up what maybe a main point of your book. Do you mind explaining a little bit what is capitalism?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you a little story about why that word was created. We, because we believe to be truly trauma sensitive or trauma informed, you need to acknowledge the economic, especially around money. You have to acknowledge the economic systems in which we live in. And we are living in a system called capitalism, and we are experiencing a lot of economic injustice within this system. We are experiencing massive racial wealth gaps, massive gender wealth gaps, and we live in an abundant world, yet there's people who don't have food or housing. And there's some states in the US that actually like criminalize poverty in some ways through like making being unhoused a crime. And so it's very hard for us to do this work without like acknowledging this system that we live in. But what we did find is that there's been a lot of like propaganda around this system that we live in that says that like one, it the way it's been presented, it often puts people in this state of like binary thinking, like it's either capitalism or it's communism. And so people have a hard time like thinking outside of that. And when you go into like the capitalism conversation, there's been a lot of propaganda around capitalism has been um, is attached to freedom, right? So like anyone can be a business, anyone can like pull up their bootstraps and become successful. And so a lot of people get very like attached to capitalism as a system because there's been so much propaganda around its like connection to their freedom. It's like the free system. And what we've actually found when we've explored capitalism is it's free for some, but for many it's not free. Like we talk about in the book, like just the statement, like the cost of living, like how there's a cost to live, like how is that freedom in this abundant world, right? And so what we had noticed in our work, because we often attract the most amazing students in our work, we attract the people who are the healers, the trauma therapists, the financial therapists, the people who work in economic justice. We attract people who really want to do good in this world. And what we had noticed is that there was a part of them that had this like anger towards the economic system that we live in because of all the injustices that exist. And because of that, they were like rejecting money, and then they were also rejecting success, leadership, and like entrepreneurship because those things have been so conflated with capitalism. Like there's been some belief that you can't have entrepreneurship without capitalism. Well, there's multiple examples of free market trade societies prior to capitalism starting 600 years ago was entrepreneurship. And so what we try to do in our work is we try to like disentangle the idea that Making money is bad and means you're a greedy, extractive capitalist. And being an entrepreneur means you're also a greedy, exploitive, extractive capitalist. We believe that you can make a lot of money. You can also be an entrepreneur, and you don't have to replicate the harmful aspects of the system, right? And so one time we were presenting to an organization that supports folks who are transitioning, like youth actually, and young adults who are transitioning out of incarceration and teaching them to become entrepreneurs. And we said, well, we were putting together some programming for them. And I was in a meeting with them with one of our faculty members, Nafasi, who runs our Black Indigenous People of Color Affinity Group, and she teaches our racial wealth gap class. And they were telling us they really want a module. They want us to come in and do a module on the racial wealth gap taught by Nafasi. And we said, okay, great. And we'll also talk about like our reimagining capitalism exercise in that session. And they were like, no, you can't say anything bad about capitalism because we're training people to be entrepreneurs. And Nafasi and I just looked at each other, and she's like, how can I talk about the racial wealth gap without talking about the system in which it exists in? And so we were just very perplexed, but also at the same time, this response happens all the time. Like, entrepreneurs can't exist without capitalism. So that night, I had a dream. And
Awesome.
so many things in trauma of money has started with I had this dream, and someone came to me in the dream and said, like, you cannot call it capitalism because people don't get that. You have to focus on the gaps. So call it capitalism. And I'm not kidding you. I woke up from my dream and I'm like, capitalism, that's what it is. Because like in this economic system of capitalism, less people have access to capital and more people have access to the gaps. And so now when we reference it, we're just more specific to what we're talking about. Like when we want to talk about reimagining the system, let's really talk about like, let's get specific and say like, we're trying to reimagine the extraction, the exploitation, the system that is creating these massive gaps. And it's not just like there's the racial wealth gap, there's the gender wealth gap, but there's also this like gap in our connection to what it means to be human. Like we live in this economic system that really devalues reciprocity. And we know from Dr. Stephen Porges that we have a neuroexpectancy of reciprocity. Like if there's not fair exchange of energy, our nervous system feels a threat to safety, and there's a lot of things that disconnect us, or to use Dr. Bruce Alexander's language, dislocate us from our natural way of being, like being close to nature and all these other things that the economic system kind of pulls us away from, creating this like gap in the soul, as we call it.
I love what you're saying. I feel like the gap. When I hear gaps, I think of class issues, right? And I think of lower class and upper class and middle class and how important all this stuff is. And at the end, like you're right, like we're all humans, and if we can't connect with the experience of others outside of context of money, like money has become in a lot of my work, I talk about like money is a language in which we experience things, but a lot of times money is the thing that keeps us apart from another rather than the thing that keeps us connected to the other.
Yes.
And I guess one thing I think is really helpful about this framing is we can validate a lot of these experiences that people don't know how to communicate well, or don't know. It's like, oh, that's what I'm experiencing. It's like, yeah, you're experiencing the stuckness
Mhm.
because in a lot of ways, the system that you are in and that we all are in, it's encouraging your stuckness. What?
Mhm. Mhm. It benefits from your stuckness. What
Mhm.
happens when you feel stuck? What happens when you feel sad, but bored, lonely, angry, tired? What do?
We
You want to
buy.
you want to soothe yourself.
Mhm.
What are you doing to soothe yourself? Do you have agency around that? You know? So yeah, the
Yeah.
system benefits from your stuckness.
What one thing that when I bring up these kinds of ideas with clients, so is they can feel validated and also discouraged because it's like I what can I do against this 600-year-old system that like there's so much powerlessness feelings.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
what's your hope that like the individual takes with them when they read about like all of these different pieces to their
Mhm.
trauma and money story? Like what do you hope the individual feels, does, thinks?
So I've seen it happen like hundreds of times, maybe even more, where people do move out of that stuckness and they reclaim their agency. But there's a couple key steps. And our Tom method can kind of take you through those steps. But the first that we've noticed is like you have to depersonalize the shame that you feel for whatever's going on with your money. Because shame is going to most likely put you in a position of avoidance or maybe doing something compulsively to soothe yourself.
Yeah.
You know, in I used to be a financial literacy educator, and a lot of the like tactics that we used in education was like personal responsibility narrative.
Yeah.
And that's not a motivator when it comes to money. When a lot of people's behaviors are actually just a response to the economic system that they live in. And they're just trying to survive day to day, you know? And so what we found is that the moment you can depersonalize, and we always ask this question, like, whose shame is this? The moment you can be like, the moment you can remove some of the burden or responsibility off your shoulders and place it on the system where it belongs, the more like spaciousness you have to actually see where you can create agency because you've like removed that weight of financial shame and systemic shame from you.
Yeah.
And so that's step one, depersonalize. Understand like a lot of the behaviors that you're doing is because you've really internalized the systemic financial shame. And okay, so what if we like reduce the burden of that a little bit? Now there's a little bit more spaciousness. But from there, you have to go into like this vision phase of reimagining. Okay, what can I do? And what can I do, like, even in my smallest interactions with money, to start creating experiences of agency? And that piece is really important. That like visioning or reimagining piece is super important. In the Tom method, it's step two, the vision phase. So we depersonalize the shame, but we don't just stop there and leave ourselves in that stuckness feeling. We go into a place of visioning. What can I do differently? And I've watched people do this over and over again where they're like, okay, well, I've identified some of the values of this system that I'm just not okay with. So in my business, I'm going to run things this way.
Mhm.
And that feels really motivating to me and good to me. Or in my spending, I'm going to do things this way. Or even this, let's say you start to feel some emotions about something. Let's say you get activated, you're in a place of shame. And in the past, your default was to go like consume something to soothe. There's not a lot of agency in that. It's like there's a survival response and then there's this deep need to soothe. And sometimes the thing we're reaching out to soothe ourselves, we've been like programmed from the external world to choose that, right? And what you can do through doing this work is identify, wow, I'm feeling activated right now. Wow, I'm noticing I want to soothe myself. I'm also noticing I usually go to online shop when I do that. And now this soothing is benefiting the system that's making me feel bad in the first place. I think I'm going to choose something different. I think I'm going to call a friend and go out in nature and go for a walk. I'm not going to deny myself the soothing, but I'm going to like replace it with something that I have agency around. Or you might be like, you know what? I do know like the consumer programming, but I'm in my agency right now deciding I do want to buy this. Like this feels good for me. Now you have more agency around it. Like you're moving from, we say this in like the 12 step world, you're moving from like becoming an actor into a, or you're moving from being a reactor into an actor.
Hmm.
And I think once you do that in a repetitive way, this is how you slowly move out of the stuckness. Okay, so those like two steps. It's like depersonalizing the shame, finding sense of agency through reimagining. The third is if you can do this in community, it's going to amplify the power of it.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's massively going to amplify the power of it. And when I say community, it might be you and your two best friends. It might be you and your partner. It might be, like get the Tom book and read it with a group of friends and practice the method and bounce your experiences off a group of friends. And you will notice like that'll support shifting out of the stuckness.
Mhm. This, uh, I just want to applaud because this is like exactly my experience working with trauma. Honestly, a lot of types of trauma, not just money trauma. You are talking about some like really key, important pieces of how we heal from trauma. I'm so glad you brought up community.
Mhm.
Um, there's all sorts of neuroscience about the benefits of community and people and mirroring and all these things. And I think it's something most of us understand kind of intuitively. And also, I'm glad you're talking about, taking agency back. My experience with trauma is people get tunnel vision,
Mhm.
and because they have to, they're in survival mode. They're just trying to pick from the next two choices. What are the choices that I have? But helping them kind of expand. Like actually, you have lots of ways to soothe.
Mhm.
Actually, um, it's not all your fault or none of your fault.
Mhm.
Like I we'll talk about like difference between guilt and shame sometimes with clients and being
Mhm.
able to be like, okay, maybe there's certain behaviors that you want to own and
Mhm.
like this is a behavior I want to do differently. We can own that and it might not be comfortable, but we can own that. And we don't need to own every piece of what's going on in your financial life. There's economic systems that you have no control over, that you didn't decide. You weren't the
Mhm.
one that set this up. Like, own your piece. Don't own everyone else's.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. I love what you're talking about. Yes, please, if you're watching this or listening to this, go and consider buying the Trauma of Money book. It is genuinely one of the best books I've
Oh,
ever read
thanks.
on the
Gosh. Oh.
trauma and money. Um, it's something I wish every single one of my clients can read at some point because it's holistic. Chantal, you are a very nurturing and warm kind of presence, and it shows up in your writing as well.
Oh,
And so
I'm
it's
so glad. I was wondering about that.
yeah, I always felt like this author cared about
Mm.
me and
Mhm. Mhm.
I wasn't going into this book expecting to be shamed, and I'm
Mhm.
very grateful that I never experienced shame as I was reading it. So,
So good.
um, yeah, I definitely consider buying the book. But anything else, Chantal, that you want to share
Yeah.
with our community? Anything that'd be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about what you were saying about working with folks with trauma and uh, carrying like too much of the burden or responsibility. And like one thing that I think is so powerful, I mean, it's been really powerful for my own trauma healing, is psychoeducation, like understanding how trauma impacts your brain. And that was one of the things that we really wanted to do with this book, is like we wanted to teach the individual the neuroscience. Like we want you to know how your brain works, because it resources you for those responses. But one of the things that happens with a lot of trauma survivors is they often have a very overdeveloped sense of responsibility. And so they are the ones who are more likely to take responsibility for the systems, for everything, because why? When we're in a trauma activation, trauma feels like out of control. It's one of the ways that we can create like containment and control, is to take responsibility. But the problem is you can't take responsibility for the systems, and you're never going to achieve the control or the containment. And then that's just going to become another source of shame for you. So I cannot like underscore enough like how important it is to just like imagine that like burden of responsibility from the systems, and you put it in a box, you remove it from yourself and place it back over there, you know? And then the moment you do that, you create the spaciousness to like work on what you can actually control.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yeah.
sometimes I think of shame, like shame is this thing that like hurts us, and it's just it's bad, right? And also, we really think about it, shame is protective,
Yes.
and
Uh-huh.
it's not helpful, but it's like shame gives us meaning.
Yeah.
Is the way I think about it. Is like I can't understand all these bad things happening in the world, or why so and so would hurt me this way, or why I'm struggling this way. Shame is almost like this easy out of
Yeah.
like, if I can say it's all my fault, I don't have to wrestle with the fact that actually it's not fair and
Yeah.
it's not okay. And
Yeah.
in some ways, that's a harder truth.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
You
well,
know, oh, so sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Chantel.
Yeah, I think I lost what I was going to say, but oh no, I know now. So one of the things that we say in trauma money is the amount of financial shame that you carry, or the amount of like, yeah, like I'd say financial shame or systemic shame is a direct correlation with how much you can be trusted with money, like from a system standpoint.
Mm,
Because if shame is connected to empathy, right? So the more we feel shame, the more capacity we have for empathy. And in our eyes, in trauma of money, if you are feeling shame for the system and you're like, this is not fair, this is an indicator that you should have more money. You can be trusted with more money. And we need money to come towards you, because you should be trusted to be a steward of that money.
yeah. Yeah.
That's why I have this artwork. You can be trusted with money, because it's such an important message.
Yeah, I noticed that artwork. Was like, man, this is like the defining feature of Chantel's. You can be trusted. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, thank you so much, Chantel. I appreciate you.
Oh,
Appreciate your work. I do apologize again for the tech issues.
okay.
And
You know more about this than I do, so I'm impressed that you got all this. And I just want
um,
to thank you, Nate, for your incredible contributions in the book. Friends, if you're listening, go read them. Nate has like these incredible gems that he dropped, that are still with me. Like when you first told them to me about like overspending, and I think we talked about gambling. It's just really powerful insights. And I'm so grateful that I was able to feature your voice, because I'm such a big fan of you and the work that you do.
that's very kind. Well, we will definitely stay in touch. And for all you listeners, make sure you go check out the Trauma of Money book. It'll be one of the best investments you make. But thanks
Yeah,
again,
and do
Chantel.
Nate's training.
Yeah. Thanks, Chantel. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.